Hello to all you homeschool families out there. My name is Kelly Harrell, and I am here today to talk to you about reading curriculum for homeschoolers. I have spent the last couple decades in education. For 12 years, I taught in the classroom, in a kindergarten classroom, as well as in a first grade classroom. And now, for the last 12 years, I have actually worked for Springs Charter School in the homeschool department while I have been able to homeschool my own children. So I've learned a lot about different curriculums, and today my goal is that when you finish this video, that you will have some idea and some direction as to the way you want to take with your child in the area of reading. So first of all, let's get straight. What is reading? So when we talk about reading, we are not talking about phonics and spelling. That's a completely different video that you can watch. In the area of reading, what we're talking about basically is literature, and we're talking about reading literature, understanding literature, and also being able to analyze that literature. And this actually starts at a young age. It may sound crazy that before your student is even reading on their own and picking up a book and reading it independently, that you need to be exposing them to good books. But it is very, very true. Nothing can take the place of your reading instruction in those early years. So, rule of thumb generally for like transitions kinder to first grade is the reading portion of literature in their day should be about 20 to 30 minutes. And that would include a read aloud or a read together, as well as comprehension questions and discussion questions to go along with that. So I brought some of my favorite kinder books with me today. You have one category of books that you have for the younger kids is the repetitive pattern. Eric Carle writes some awesome repetitive pattern books. I brought just a couple of my favorites. Those of you who know me know why this one is my favorite. The neat thing about this is it has repetitive words that your child can actually read along with you while you're going through the book. In this book, it's slowly, because we're talking about a sloth. And so the things he does are very slow. And what I also love about Eric Carle is he exposes students to different ideas. This is actually talking a lot about the rainforest, as well as different animals who live there and the different types of weather that they experience. While you are reading aloud to your students, it's important that they be able to engage with you. So they should be sitting either next to you or somewhere where they can see all of the pictures. It's also important to ask them, what do you see in this picture? That's kind of called a picture walk. And a lot of times before we would even start reading, we would do a picture walk through the book. And we also might ask them to predict, what do you think is going to happen in this book? Or when you get towards the end, you might say, what do you think is going to happen next? Of course, it depends on the book and the story, what questions you're going to ask. Always point out the author to the students. That's important for them to know, as well as the author, as well as the title of the book. And some books too, some picture books will also have an illustrator. So these are repetitive pattern books. The cool thing about these books is you read them enough to your kids, pretty soon they will be picking them up and they will be reading them to you. Does that mean that your student knows all of the pictures? Not necessarily, but it's teaching them that the words go with the pictures, and it's teaching them how to, in a sense, read the book. My son actually started reading Eric Carle books to us when he was 4. He couldn't completely sound out the words. He was doing it from memory, but that's important in the process of reading. That's one of the first steps. Another type of literature that you can read to your kids when they're younger is you can get a collection of stories. Here's one that I purchased for my daughter, very girly, all about the fairy tales. And we had a great time talking about these. And for this collection, she had actually seen some of the Disney movies, and so we would talk about how are these stories different from the ones that Disney has made. Again, I'm reading aloud to her. I don't expect her to know the words, but I want her to interact with the stories. Who are the characters? What's the conflict or the problem in the story? And it's okay to use big words like that as long as you explain them to your child and explain what those words mean. The other type of literature that you can read to your pre-K through first grader, there's lots of different series out there. These are a few that were really popular when my kids were little. We have Clifford books, Franklin books, Curious George books. In every book is about a different topic, yet the same characters are in it, so it's familiar. When you find a series, regardless of how young or old your child is, when you find a series that they love, I encourage you, get all of those books because they will want to read them over and over and over again. And that, my friend, is a marvelous thing. So you have different series. Again, make sure that you talk about what is the title of the book, talk about the characters, maybe ask them to do predictions based on previous books that they've read in the series. What do you think the character is going to do now? When I taught kindergarten, one of the ways that we taught was thematically. I loved teaching thematically, especially because there are some great picture books that fall into different themes. We would always start the year off with the bear theme. And so we would read different books about different bears. Jesse Bear was one who had a whole series of books based on him. And one of my very favorite ones, which is also kind of a repetitive pattern book, is The Little Mouse, The Red Ripe Strawberry, and The Big Hungry Bear. This is a super fun story to read, and you can also talk about point of view or POV in this book. Because this book is written from a narrator's perspective, someone looking on the scene, and he's talking to the mouse about this big hungry bear who's going to come and try to steal his strawberry. Now, another resource that you can get for your younger students to kind of make reading picture books more engaging and to bring in different aspects of it is to get a literature book like this. Now, this is one that I had when I was in my kindergarten, when I taught in the kindergarten classroom. It's put out by the makers of Mailbox magazine, which is an excellent resource for pre-K and K. But the neat thing about this is it has different worksheets based on the story. So like this worksheet is based on the Little Mouse, the Red Ripe Strawberry, and the Big Hungry Bear. And it says, what did the mouse do with the strawberry? So this is teaching comprehension in a different way. So it's not just you asking your student questions, but it's a worksheet that they can engage in. Here is a picture from the story, and it has them color the different things in the code. There's a color box in here, and it has them coloring them different colors. Here's a fun activity of making a treat based on the book. There are also extension activities such as a journal prompt writing that says, if I were going to hide a strawberry, I would, and then they can draw a picture and then they can dictate their answer to you. And then there's also a math and letter related activity with strawberries to kind of pull in the whole thing. So you can find different literature books that help you teach literature and have worksheets related to that literature in your teacher stores, probably online. There's also Teachers Pay Teachers. There's a lot of online resources that you can find, so you can actually find your favorite book and then you can find worksheets to go along with it. So that is kinder through first grade. Another thing, as the kids start to get older into like first and second grade, when they're starting to read independently and they have some pretty easy beginning reading books, you can also do things called novel ties with them. I love novel ties. Now, the neat thing about novel ties is novel ties are comprehension guides, and they have books all the way from kindergarten level through high school. So your kids can really grow with the novel ties. I don't have the actual book, but Sammy the Seal and Danny the Dinosaur, those are more like beginning readers for kinder, and they actually have novel ties with that. Frog and Toad would probably be about first grade level. And then we have Holes. There's a novel tie for Holes, which is about fourth grade level. Anne of Green Gables, like seventh grade level, all the way up to books like Animal Farm and even Shakespeare books for high schoolers. So the great thing that I love about novel ties is it helps you to teach your child how to be independent. And in the homeschool world, this is very important. I actually made a video about doing more than just homeschooling in a day. One of the keys to that is finding curriculums that can help train your student on how to be independent. The novel tie is broken down into different sections, and so it will tell you the chapter title or the chapter number up at the top. And so this all these worksheets that follow are going to be based on that chapter. The first thing that the students do is vocabulary. Vocabulary is very important when it's tied to literature. One of the reasons you never just want to give your kid a book and say, go read it, is because the author has put in vocabulary that the student might not know, but that is grade appropriate. And so it's important that you have some kind of guide to help your students so that they can understand the vocabulary they're reading before they come to it in the book. So for this level, it has, it says one word in each row does not belong. Circle that word, tell why it does not belong. So you have snow pants, hat, sled, scarf. And you would think, okay, which one of those does not fit? Well, sled does not fit because it's not something you wear. Okay, so that's what the first grader would do first. They would do the vocabulary. Then it says down at the bottom, read to find out whether Toad goes out on a cold winter day. So then your student is reading independently. And then after they finish reading, they come back to you. And another thing I love about the novel tie is they break down the types of questions. So you have the story questions, the picture questions, and then the questions for discussion. All of these are very important. This is how we get our students to be a higher level thinker and a higher level of learning to happen, is by asking a variety of questions. Now, parents, have no fear. You do not have to read every single book with your students, because that's right, the answers are in the back. So really all you have to do is flip to the back to find your answers, so that you know all the questions. You know all the answers. You sound really smart to your student, okay? And the questions for discussion, they don't really have answers because really it's your student's opinion. And this is something we really do need to teach within our younger students. So often school, especially traditional school, is all about the teacher telling them what to do, telling them what to think. The discussion questions ask important questions. Do you think Frog was right to make Toad come out and play in the snow? And then you get to have this discussion with your child. And to me, one of the best parts about homeschooling is being able to have those discussions. It's being able to teach them what you believe and to help them to form their own beliefs within the world that they live. Okay, so novel ties are really a great thing. And like I said, they start in first grade and they go all of the way up to high school level. You can search for them online. Learning Links is actually the publisher for novel ties. Just an aside, if you are with Springs Charter School, some of the vendors you can get them from BMI online books. You can get novel ties sometimes from Rainbow Resource, and you can also find some on Amazon. I always like to go to Learning Links first because the cool thing is you can search for the novel ties by what reading level they are. And if you know the program Reading A to Z, they actually have them have the different levels from A to Z. So that way you can have your ES if you want uh, test your student and with the learning reading A to Z, and then tell you what level of novel tie you should be looking at. Okay, so those are novel ties. So we have covered the literature for pre-K through first grade. We've talked about novel ties, how those extend all the way through high school. The other thing I'll just throw out there, one of the things I love the most about novel ties too, I love a lot of things about novel ties, as you can tell, but is I was given the ability to choose the novels that my students, that my kids, my own children read. And there are a lot of really great novels out there. Traditional schools, traditional classrooms, I will tell you, they use what are called anthologies. An anthology is basically a collection of short stories or chapters from different books. For the younger kids, sometimes there might be an entire picture book within that anthology. But one of the things I didn't love about that for the older kids is it just will give you one chapter from the book, but then the student never gets to read the entire book. So they're kind of missing that entire story arc. So that's why I really enjoy novel ties or literature guides. So the other thing you could have your older students do for sure is read different series of books, and then you can find a literature guide that goes with that entire series. My daughter, I believe, was in fourth grade when she read the Little House series. She read it from beginning to end. That was all of our literature for that year, was reading through the Little House series. She loved it because not only did she get a little piece of history, but she got to see Laura and her sisters all grow up. I loved it because I knew what book was going to come next. She was engaged in the book, and then I bought one literature guide that went through every single book, and they had different comprehension questions for different chapters. It had the vocabulary. It even had some fun extension activities. You'll also see that within the novel ties as well. They will have extension activities and journal writing from time to time. So that's kind of one of the neat things about using a novel tie or a literature guide, is it will give you extension activities that your students can do. The other thing that these literature guides and novel ties pull out that a lot of times as a homeschool parent you might not think about because you don't have an English degree, but they will actually pull out different literary devices. So, like, when's the last time you thought about personification or explain that to your student? Or when's the last time you talked about alliterations? See, these are all things that the novel tie will bring in the right chapter. And so it's related to their reading, and you are able to explain that to the student. Another really great series that my son loved, I believe he read this in 5th or 6th grade by himself, was The Chronicles of Narnia. And we had a complete lit guide, a huge book that went through every single book in the series. And again, he loved spending that time in this series for an entire year. He really, really enjoyed it. So for your older kids, you can also look into different series of books, but make sure that you get that lit guide to go with it that kind of helps direct the learning. And again, by the time they get to like 4th grade, those lit guides should be completely independent, and all you're really doing is making sure to tell them how much is expected for them to finish every day, as well as grading it to give them feedback. Always grade it to give them feedback. And then they also know that you are actually going to check up on them. That's super important. Now, if you're like, oh, Kelly, well, I get that, but I don't know that I'm that organized, or maybe your kid kind of gets tired of reading an entire book. Well, there are books like this Day Book of Critical Reading and Writing. And this is a little bit like that anthology I was telling you about. And they are going to pull out different types of text. So in this one, it's focusing on language and craft. And The Weary Blues by Langston Hughes is going to be the story. Now, this is also a very independent book, and it actually teaches the students sometimes how to make notes about the text, or sometimes it will have notes about the text that they will have to answer. It also does have comprehension questions, as well as discussion questions. And then this one pulls in writing as well, which we are going to do a whole nother video on writing, because that's a super important part of language arts as well. So you can find books like the Day Book of Critical Reading and Writing. There are lots of publishers out there who do anthologies. Houghton Mifflin, Harcourt are different traditional publishers that are secular, and then there are different Christian publishers out there. Becca, I totally lost the name of, Bob Jones is another one. But remember, this is not phonics and spelling. This is reading. This is literature, okay? There's another great resource, and if you are with Springs Charter School, we have this in Bookmart, and I highly recommend this as a resource. It's a great resource. It wouldn't be an entire year curriculum by itself, because there are only 20-ish lessons. Sorry, I have the teacher's guide, not the student book. So I think there are about 26 lessons. But what's nice about this is it talks about the different type of text. So it talks about informational text, it talks about literature, it talks about the structure of it and the key ideas in literature. It talks about plays and the setting and the theme. As a homeschool parent, you might not always touch on all of these things. So this is a great resource to pull in that will help you cover all the different types of text. It is important not just for the standardized testing that students take at the end of the school year, but also as they move forward into high school and also into college, that they are able to understand and interpret the different aspects of the different texts. So the Ready Common Core is a great resource for you to do that. Again, I would not use this all by itself. I would still have your student read some great literature to go along with it. Okay. The other really cool thing about homeschooling is you can do different programs that combined various subjects. Okay, so there are different literature-based history programs as well as literature-based science programs out there. Secular programs are Bookshark is one of them. Moving Beyond the Page is another non-religious literature-based curriculum where the students are reading really good literature based in either science or in history. One of my favorite curriculums that I have used for history for years and years and years is Beautiful Feet. This is kind of old school. The new Beautiful Feet guides you can actually get on PDF. So that way you can just reproduce them yourself and you don't have to worry about using them for your kids and only using them once. But the neat thing about Beautiful Feet is the guide itself is really the only Christian part of the program, the majority of the books are not necessarily considered Christian. And therefore, if you are with a charter school, like we have a lot of charter schools out here in California, you can actually use educational funds to purchase a lot of these books. And if you are with Springs Charter School, we actually have a lending center which you can check out a lot of these books for an entire year and keep them in your library and use them, and then just turn them back in June. So let me kind of go through the idea of a literature-based program. This one, again, is related to history. So basically, it breaks it down, and every lesson is going to tell you what book the student is in, what reading they're going to do, and then it's going to have questions based on that reading. It's also going to have activities. Now, Beautiful Feet is a little different in that one lesson might actually take more than 1 or 2 days. Moving Beyond the Page and I believe Book Shark is pretty straightforward in their pacing, and usually one lesson is going to be I believe like about 1 day or about 1 week. Okay. And if you're with Springs Charter School, we actually have pacing guides for Moving Beyond the Page, and Moving Beyond the Page is available in Bookmark. So sometimes when you are doing a literature-based history or science program, they might have more of an informational text for you. So Beautiful Feet uses these as informational texts. We have the world of Columbus and his sons, the world of Captain John Smith, and Abraham Lincoln's world. So these are a little different than regular textbooks because they are still written kind of in a story form. So that's one type of literature that they use that is more informational text, which we talked about earlier in those books that teaches you how to read informational text. This is great informational text. But then they also have some great historical fiction books. So a historical fiction book is basically a book that is set in a specific time of history. It might even have certain historical figures in it, but there's also a fictional twist or a fictional aspect of it. So it has lots of different historical fiction books to go with it. Beautiful Feet covers different areas or different time periods of history. And we'll talk more about that when it comes to history. But I loved doing this program with my kids. We would start it once they were in 3rd grade because the reading is so tremendous. They really do have a lot of books that they're reading. And even though they're reading it for history, you better believe it crosses over to that language arts reading as well. Oh my gosh. Imagine if you could spend, like, instead of spending an hour a day in history, and then once kids get into like 4th grade and above, they could be spending anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour just in that reading and literature section. So imagine if you could do that and get it done in an hour, and that would knock out both your history and your reading. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I would still supplement at different times, especially when my kids were reading from one of the informational texts. At that point, I would usually have them also do a novel tie for literature because there were some really good books I wanted them to read, and they did what I said. So, but if you have a student too who reading is not their strongest suit, it might be like pulling teeth to get them to read anything. And so a program that is literature based for either history or science could be a great relief to both of you, because then that's a lot less work in their day. They're basically, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So let's kind of recap. Literature is really important, and that is an important part of reading. The other thing I don't think I necessarily mentioned, but just like math, it is super, super important that your students are reading every single day, every single day, even when they're on vacation. Make sure your students are reading at least 20 minutes a day. My video is getting ready to cut off because we're at 30 minutes. But if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I am here to help you on your educational journey. Homeschooling rocks, and you can do it. See you later.